The eldest child and daughter of former President Robert Mugabe, Mrs. Bona Mugabe Chikere has approached the High Court seeking to reverse the decision of a magistrate rejecting her appeal against the order by Chief Zvimba to exhume her father's remains from the family homestead. Chinhoyi magistrate Ms. Ruth Moyo last year threw out the application by Mrs. Mugabe Chikere and her siblings, Robert Jr. and Chatunga Mugabe, for a review of the chief's order, saying they had nothing to do with the chief's ruling, as the person cited in the case was their mother, Mrs. Grace Mugabe. This prompted the appeal to the High Court that was heard yesterday before Justice Amy Tsanga sitting with Justice Slivia Chirao Mugamba. The judges reserved judgment to a later date after hearing submissions from the legal counsel for the Mugabe family and for Mr. Tinos Manongavir, the village head who complained before Chief Zvimba last year that Mr. Mugabe was improperly interred. Advocate Tawanda Zuwarara, instructed by Chimwamurumb law firm, argued the matter for the Mugabe family, while Mr. Pardon Nakwara acted for Mr. Manongavir. Advocate Zuwarara argued that the magistrate made multiple errors, including her ruling that only those physically in the chief's court when the original order was given could appeal against that order. Zuwarara argued that the right to appeal was not limited to parties who appeared before the chief's court, but also included any person aggrieved by the decision, and he cited previous judicial proceedings. He argued that the original order against Mrs. Grace Mugabe to exhume the remains of the late former president was in itself a criminal offense. In his submissions, Mr. Nakwara argued that the appeal was defective for non-compliance with the High Court rules, which Zuwarara counter-argued that the appeal had to be directed by the magistrate's court rules. The Mugabes had asked the Chinhoyi court to make a judicial review of Chief Zvimba's ruling, compelling Mrs. Mugabe to exhume her husband's remains and rebury them at the National Heroes Acre in Harare. But Ms. Moyo ruled that Mrs. Mugabe Chikere had no right to apply for a judicial review of the matter that was handed down by Chief Zvimba, born Stanley Mindoro. The basis of the appeal, as cited by the family legal counsel, was that absence of jurisdiction, impropriety of relief granted, irregular service of summons, and the judgment was biased. The Chief Zvimba fined Mrs. Mugabe 5 cattle and 2 goats for burying the former president at his homestead instead of the family cemetery in Kutama village. He also ordered Mrs. Mugabe to exhume the former president's remains and rebury them at the National Heroes Acre. Upholding Mr. Manongavir's complaint, he fined Mrs. Grace Mugabe for contempt of court and incorrectly burying her husband. Earlier this week, the courts removed from the roll a separate application by Mrs. Mugabe seeking to block the exhumation of her husband's remains, as per the village court ruling.
I'm the street.